All right, hey guys, today we're going to do 48 to 52 politics, and we're going to talk about some political changes and changes on the domestic front in America during this time period. So we're going to discuss how did Taft-Hartley damage the progressive labor rights movement. We're going to talk about Truman's Fair Deal, and we're going to identify K1C2. And how did the Checkers speech help the Eisenhower-Nixon ticket win the 52 election? Okay, so we're going to discuss, obviously, the rise of Eisenhower into office. I'd mentioned this before, but I had not actually taught you about that election. So we're going to do that right now. All right, so we're going to start with, obviously, the title, 48-52 Politics. And it says, after the war, there are lots of labor disputes leading the American people to give the Republicans both houses of Congress. And this would be after World War II. Okay, so after World War II, lots of labor disputes. A lot of people are, folks are back at work that were in the war before, and there's no real patriotic reason to work without good pay, anymore because the war's over. So people start wanting what was theirs, and what they should be getting. So it says the Republicans quickly passed the Taft-Hartley Act in 1947, and Taft-Hartley is going to outlaw closed shops. So in other words, closed shops said you had to be in the union, and you might want to write this here, that you had to be in the union. That's what a closed shop means. Outlawing that means you do not have to be in the union. So closed shop is you had to be in the union. This says that it outlawed it, so you did not have to be in a union. They're making it easier for people to get this job but not have to join a union. On the flip side, they're making it harder for unions to stay in existence. It also allows states to pass right-to-work laws preventing a union shop. So, for example, right now, and you might want to put this here, the state of North Carolina is a right-to-work state. That means it's civil servants such as police, firemen that are paid, teachers, for example, cannot join a union. We have the right to work. So we cannot go on strike. That's what that means. We can't be asked by a union to go on strike because we are not in a union, and it's not allowed. Therefore, it suppresses any union rights because I can't be in a union. Like even today, I cannot join one in North Carolina. So Taft-Hartley has personally impacted me because I cannot join a union to advocate for better pay or better working conditions. It also says it allowed the president to invoke an 80-day cooling off period before a strike. So for areas or states that did allow union activity, before you could even go on a strike, you had to wait 80 days. And there had to be some sort of negotiation with the boss to see if an agreement could be reached. So it says Truman vetoes this bill. He calls it a slave labor bill. Think about Ms. King and the other teachers not allowed to join the union, that we must work. Congress will override his veto, and this does go into effect, and that's why I'm not in the union. Okay. Election of 48. So you have 4 candidates here. Harry Truman, who was the Democrat. Thomas Dewey, who was the Republican. Henry Wallace, who's a progressive. Remember, they want progress in society, so they're going to argue for better water quality, better jobs for people, clean up the cities, that kind of thing, fight for the people. And Strom Thurmond, a Dixiecrat. And this is a group that basically is Southern Democrats that are segregationists. So they are... I think it's easy for me to say they were very much racist, and they supported continual segregation of society. So basically, these two guys, Thurmond and Wallace, are going to be the third-party candidates, and really the race is between Truman and Dewey. Truman shouts out to everybody, I'll move this up, if you send another Republican Congress to Washington, meaning a bunch of Republicans to take over Congress, you're a bigger bunch of suckers than I think you are. and the people yelled, "Give 'em hell, Harry." So that became his nickname, "Give 'em hell, Harry," because he called it like it was, and he said, if you people vote in Republicans, you're a bunch of idiots. Okay, it says Truman won in an upset and brought in a Democratic Congress. So he was very effective calling people out for voting Republican. He wins and brings in a Democratic Congress. So a few pictures, well, information to show you. This is information about Truman. And you see here, he's a Democratic Party person. We know him as dropping the bomb, right? It talks about all this information, became vice president after FDR's death. Here he's running for president again, was a former farmer. So he called it like it was, if you know what I mean. Okay, so anyway, he wins and he brings in a Democratic Congress, which is very, very important to the Democrats. All right, so then with that said, let me move myself again. Congress is going to pass the 22nd Amendment in 1951. 22nd, 2-2. So you can remember that because it is 2 terms for the president. And obviously, this is a direct reaction to the long presidency that we had under FDR. And of course, Truman was his vice president. So during this time period, Congress moves to say, we've had enough of the FDR 4-term deals. We're going to limit the president to 2 terms, 22nd Amendment. So remember, 1 term, you might want to write this up here. I'm sure you know, but just as a reminder, 1 term is 4 years. So if they can have 2 terms, that would be 4 times 2 is 8 total years. Now, there are some catches to that. If, like Truman, if you were vice president less than 2 years under the president for the first time and he dies, then you're going to serve out his term and that's your term. But if you were president in the, vice president in the last 2 years of his term and he dies, you will finish out the last 2, let's say it's a year, you'll finish out that year, but that does not count as your term. So if it's less than half the time period of a regular term, meaning less than 2 years, then you get to run 2 more times. So technically, if you're VP becoming president, you could serve 2 terms as president, which would be 8 years, and then up to 2 years as vice president before that, which would be 10. We can talk about that more in class if you're confused, but I just wanted to say, in general, for president, 2 terms is the max, unless you've been VP by the fact that the president died and it was less than 2 years left of his term. Okay, so Truman's Fair Deal is going to be a reform program to provide national health care insurance, which is interesting because this is in the 50s and we're not actually going to get it until President Obama's administration. So he's going to say, let's aid education and deal with our health care insurance and provide national health care. Nearly all of it was blocked by Congress. It's interesting because he had a Democratic Congress, which should support everything he does, but they don't see eye to eye. So it says, due to Truman's conflicts with Congress and Cold War concerns, they're not agreeing on that. They do agree, and I put it in a different color, on an increase in minimum wage. So that's good. Workers will get paid a little bit more. Okay, so then I want to show you too, I need to go back real quick and talk about for a second Thomas Dewey. So everyone thought that Dewey was going to win. And the night of the presidential election in 2016 between Senator Clinton and Donald Trump, I also, like the rest of America mostly, thought that Hillary Clinton was going to win. And she even had at her big soiree in New York, like they always rent out like a ballroom or some nice hotel room to have their celebration or concession speech, meaning I lost speech or the I won speech and let's celebrate. And so she rented out some nice hotel in New York City, and they literally had fireworks that were set to go off over New York City when it was announced that she won. And they had all these balloons and things above the convention center. They were going to release those in the ballroom. And they even had like a glass ceiling they were going to show shattering because she became the first female president. Except she didn't. So she lost. And the next day, I saw Newsweek and Time magazine covers that had Hillary Clinton, first female president, on it because they'd gone ahead and printed them thinking she was going to win. And she didn't. So I bring that up to say when I saw that, you know what I said to my husband? I said, this is just like Truman. Okay, just like his election with Thomas Dewey. So I want to show you that picture real quick. And Truman thought it was absolutely hilarious and mocked it, much like Donald Trump did. They had printed in the newspaper, Dewey defeats Truman. And this is Truman. And you notice he's laughing because Dewey didn't defeat him. So he's saying, look, I outskunked all you people. Like, even the media thought I was going to lose. And, you know, I didn't. So he didn't, neither did Donald Trump. Okay, so back to what we were doing over here. We're going to get to another election, the election of 52. So this is Adlai Stevenson, the Democrat, versus Dwight Eisenhower, the Republican. And I've talked about, we saw Eisenhower in World War II. Americans are going to chant, I like Ike, because that was his nickname, Ike. And they held up signs, K1, C2. K was, we're going to end the Korean War, which he does. We're going to end communism, that's the first C, which he does not. And we're going to end corruption, that's the second C, which he does not do either. To prove that point, I'm going to talk about his running mate. So his running mate was Richard Nixon of California. Nixon was accused by the media of having a secret like slush fund where rich supporters would pour cash into it just for Nixon's personal use. And that was totally illegal. Any cash going to the campaign was supposed to go to the Republican campaign for him to use for plane tickets and getting his people here and there to do the campaigning, but not like personal cash for him. So he goes on television, which you will see later, and he gives what's called the checker speech. And he says, ladies and gentlemen, there's only one gift I've ever been given, and it was a gift to my daughters from a man in Texas. And it was a cute dog, and the little girls, my daughters, named him Checkers. And I don't care what anybody says about it, we're keeping that dog. Well, everybody was like, they watched it, were like, oh, the dog and the little girls and how sweet, and just totally, like, you know, glossed over the fact that perhaps he had taken all of this cash. So he says, regardless what they say about it, we're going to keep the dog. Eisenhower and Nixon win, and the Republican Congress also takes over. So they are very, very successful. I just want to show you, if I can get on the screen, a couple of pictures. This one here, right here, no, other page right here, is of Nixon and his family. And basically in the picture, if you see at the bottom, there's a dog, and that's Checkers. There's another picture of Nixon with that dog. Here it is. See the dog sitting there while he reads the paper? And it even says, you can see from my hand, it's a dog named Checkers. That's the dog they were talking about. And they made sure to put him in the media, you know, after this scandal. So obviously Eisenhower's still going to be faced with corruption issues because of his vice president. Also, I need to say that Nixon turns against the media as a result of this. He blames them. Eisenhower's approach is dynamic conservatism. He wants to cut spending, reduce taxes, but be conservative with money, like use it for things he really thinks are important, liberal with human beings. He passes the largest public works program in history, which is the Federal Highway Act. See my highway here? Federal Highway Act. Notice how big I did it? I did it really big because they're going to institute the interstate highway system, and it's going to be so large that we can land planes on it because of the Cold War, in case there's some war with Russia. $25 billion, 40,000 miles of interstate were built. And if I can show you real quick, here's a picture of that sign.